perspectives. We know that no one choice is the perfect answer, but the forum is designed to make us think, to clarify what we value, what we believe in, and to help us consider acceptable compromises. Now, you can join tonight's live discussion by phone. I'll give you that phone number to call right after I introduce our topic this evening with the three choices. Normally we have what we call a starter tape, a video that outlines the three choices, but a little technical glitch means you'll have to listen to me for a few more minutes this evening than usual. Choice number one, or option one, regarding national security, states that the United States has focused too much already on policing and protecting the world and not enough on shoring up its own prosperity and taking care of its own people. It's time to put our country's needs first. We spend billions on defense and foreign aid while at home bridges and highways are crumbling. Students face mountains of debt and people go bankrupt trying to pay their medical bills. It's time to prioritize our country's needs. A primary drawback of this particular choice might be that we can turn our backs on the world's chaos, but we can't seal the borders from its impact. Choice number two, and of course I'll go through the three choices, then we'll go back and begin discussing number one. Choice number two says the United States can't afford to ignore what's happening outside our borders. We need to remain the world's strongest power. Russia and China are flexing their military and economic muscles. North Korea has tested missiles and nuclear weapons. Americans fear foreign terrorist attacks both at home and abroad, and even our robust economy is threatened by unfair trade practices, and our democracy is put at risk by outside election meddling. Investing in being the world's dominant power helps ensure stability in a dangerous world and protects our freedom and prosperity by fighting threats at their source rather than on our shores. A primary drawback of choice number two would be bearing the burden of containing the world's crisis by military power entangles us in wars that have little to do with our own safety and that could bankrupt us in the long run. And choice number three, given the varied and complex dangers we face today, this option says our biggest threat is assuming that the United States can go it alone, whether it's isolating ourselves or acting unilaterally. Today's global challenges include migration, refugees, cyber terrorism, and more. Deadly new infectious diseases and effects of climate change remind us that the natural world poses its own threats and don't respect borders. By emphasizing diplomacy and building alliances, we can better solve complex crises and head off future ones. In the long run, promoting democracy and human rights makes the world both safer and more prosperous. A primary drawback of choice number three, this means counting on other countries and trusting them to keep their agreements with us. But we should not be naive. The United States should be able to act unilaterally to protect our own interests. Now we're going to go back to choice number one. And if you would like to participate in our forum this evening, you may do so by calling 594-5301. The number will be up on the screen. Please gather your thoughts prior to calling so that you can be concise when we do get you on the air. And please also, before you go on air, please turn down the sound on your television, all the way down. Otherwise, we get feedback in the system. All right. Choice number one. Quick recap. States that we need to put America, our people, our prosperity ahead of policing and protecting the rest of the world. Anybody want to launch on that subject? Well, that's a lot of quiet faces. We just can't have that, folks. We got an hour and a half, just saying. Okay. Franklin.
A lot of people think we need to focus on the people in America before foreign countries, and a lot of people don't trust some of our agencies, but actually, to protect our people, we have to trust our agencies that work for the government. They risk their lives, they risk many people's lives to gather information to protect us. So I think when we say we're protecting the people of America, in my opinion, the only way to do it is we have to go outside America and get information too.
Emerson?
I agree. Crime has gone global, and as such, then we have to have a global response. We cannot do it by ourselves because all of us carry a computer on our hip, which we didn't have to contend with 50 years ago. And everyone has access not only to information about individuals, but they have access to information that allows them to create things that can hurt us from a distance and from afar, as well as disrupt a number of our systems that we rely on, our financial system, our education system, our transportation system, our utility system. So again, we have to be conscious that everything has gone global, therefore law enforcement and cooperation has to follow suit.
Thank you. Yes.
Of the three options, I favor option one, the strongest. I don't mean to be a non-interventionist ideologically. We should always be considering the situation at hand, each individual case. But I believe that a lot of these agencies that are part of the national government need to be held account because we often are unaware of all of their actions all over the world. So currently we're facing a lot of trouble from mass migration from Central America. Not a lot of people are aware of just how much intervention the State Department and the CIA had been involved with in Central America in the years like 2008 to 2010. And the same problem goes with our intervention in Libya and in Syria, which caused mass migration out of that area and causing a lot of instability now in Europe in certain areas. And so we need to be paying more attention to these national government departments like the State Department and the CIA.
Thank you. Reggie.
The only thing I would say with that, and I understand where you're coming from, is saying we don't know, but a lot of things that we don't know is because we don't study. We don't look into what we got in our sources out there in the government, because all of these areas, unless it's in a Secret Service type environment, the answer's out there. It's just us going out and doing the research and to be able to get ourselves educated on what's going on out there, because it's already there. So the opportunity is there for us to look up. I really do agree, after being in the service 32 years myself, I really didn't understand that until I joined the service, to understand that, yes, we need to be in the lead. We need to be out helping other people, keeping them from being up in our house, and to make sure that we're protected. And that's why it's not only for the military, but it's for other things that we do. Oil business, anything that we're doing out there with other countries is for our benefit also. It's just not for the other country.
All right. I'm going with Chet, Austin, and Mary. I know you're all waiting. Chet?
Just a bit of history for this kind of thought process. If we go back to the mid-30s and look at what we did in the Great Depression, we pulled in all of our resources, and we said we're going to feed our people, we're going to deal with us first. We created the Conservation Corps, we did some other things, but we stopped looking outside to see what was going on. We also closed our borders, and we tried the government tried to make sure no one came in. And so now there's a bit of infamy in that, because a number of ships filled with Jews came and they weren't allowed into the country. Some of them had to go back to Europe and the people were killed. Some of them went to Mexico and then ultimately emigrated into the United States after World War II. If we try to cut ourselves off and keep ourselves isolated, in the old days it didn't work really well. But to Emerson's point earlier, in this day of modern global communication and our ability with computers, it wouldn't work at all.
All right. Austin?
From what you, Chet, and Emerson are asking for is for us to stay on our current track of globalization. But it wasn't what America was originally founded and based on. We were trying to get away. We were facing an idealism of isolation. And we were isolationists all the way up into the World Wars. We didn't interfere roughly in the majority of all countries and all affairs of the world. Up until later on in the later 1800s, we started to interfere with China. We interfered with Cuba, Venezuela. We started to interfere not only in their governments, but their economies, the markets. And that is what threw us onto the forefront of the stage to lead the global economy, lead the global power. But now we're facing that question again. Do we go back to our isolationist ways, or do we lead the global forum? But how are we going to balance that in the market? Does that mean that America is going to have the ultimate authority to intervene in any government it deems as inadequate? I mean, we're becoming exactly what we were running from, which was that English monarchy in the 1600s.
I'm going Mary, and then Jerome and Andres.
Austin, thank you for your thoughts, but I totally disagree with you. Obviously. We have to remember what this country is founded on and our Constitution. The purpose of our government is actually very limited, and it's primarily for the national defense. We have gotten off on all these wild goose chases where we have done all this social engineering and social programs and so forth and so on. But the national defense remains very stable over the years. And just like Emerson said, there are more and more threats in ways that we have not faced threats before. So when we talk about downsizing the military or downsizing security, we have to stop and ask ourselves, what is the right size? It's not an exact percentage of the budget. I would say it needs to be right-sized to the emerging threats we have, and we have some emerging threats that are very, very serious. And I would submit that some of these threats can knock out millions and millions of our citizens through cyber warfare, by taking down some of our satellites, by affecting our power grids, and they don't have to fire a single missile into our country. So those are some of our emerging threats, and we have to be very well aware we cannot be isolationists anymore. It's just not possible.
We have a phone call from Nicholas. Good evening, Nicholas. Please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I am a veteran. My family are Marines from 1947 all the way till now. We got grandchildren, cousins, nephews, everything, okay? So I am very, very much aware that we do have a strong military and that we should help our neighbors, our other countries. My position is we are spending our resources helping other nations when our people, our Americans, the ones that I put my life on the line for, that my family put their lives on the line for, we got millions of Americans in great need. And I don't understand why we Americans are less important than other people around the world. If somebody can please answer that question for me. Why don't we take care of our people, Americans, first? Then if we have more resources, we can help our neighbors. But please, guys, we got Americans in great need. And we watch the TV and we watch our neighbors in this country living in the streets.
Thank you very much for your call, Nicholas. I think he's articulated at a personal level the very core of choice number one. Jerome, I don't know if that's where you were headed, but would you care to?
Well, I can speak to it, and then I'll pivot back to the point that I was going to make. In a past speech that Reverend Jesse Jackson made in his contention for the presidency of the United States, he used to say, or he said, that the character of a nation is measured by how well it takes care of its indigent and less fortunate. And I am certainly in agreement with that. But the function of leadership is to be able to prioritize and direct the resources so it makes sense not only here at home, but around the world. If you pause and think for just a minute, if we let certain things fester in other places, those very problems could blow in our direction. And there are certain things that just don't have borders. If you have poor air quality coming out of Latin America, a war is not going to stop that. I think that we need to make sure that the leadership we put in place is cognizant of those challenges and has some system of prioritization that the rest of the country can understand and empathize with. The second point I'll make, and I'm going back to a point that Reggie was making too, I put 21 years in, and I found that there's no better quality intelligence than human intelligence. To be on the ground, to be able to determine what the terrain is like, and the most accurate information you can gather from any source is somebody who's there. Nobody can tell you the temperature of the water unless they got their foot in it. And I believe that part of the quality of information that we get will determine the quality of decisions that we make. So, yeah, I believe we need to be out there with sensors, people on the ground, assessing situations as they come about in real time. We certainly have the communications means to get that into the leadership channels, and I don't think we should ever ignore or underestimate what that true value is.
All right, thank you. And Andres?
Yes, coming back to the point of American globalization, American dominance over the world, it's my firm belief that when we were isolated, even in the beginning of this country, we weren't really a strong military power. We could have been, but we chose not to be. The only reason we went to globalization was in the wars of the piracy in Libya. Now, through that, we realized that we do have the ability of actually protecting ourselves and also protecting others, which is where we needed to expand. Without expansion, America would have been destroyed by itself. Now, back to your point in the 1930s, while we were isolated, Japan was invaded to China. It was taking Manchuria, and then it just rolled over the second Sino-Japanese war, and we really didn't do anything. And we knew there was a possibility that Japan was going to attack us to get the oils in the Philippines and the oil in Indonesia. It's until we were attacked that we acted, and we let millions of people die for it.
We have another phone call, and I'll come back to Franklin and whoever else is ready. Manuel, good evening. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Please.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, Manuel.
Hello. Hello. My name is Manuel Marufo, and I'm also a veteran. I'm a veteran, and I have served this country for over 23 years. I am now an invalid. I've served and I've given my life and my health. The VA has helped me so much, but I have to be firm in saying that we are not only citizens of this country, we are citizens of the world. The world is our home, and everyone that lives in this world should be taken care of with the same care that we give my fellow brother or sister, my neighbor. I believe that, and whether we have it or not, we should break our bread with everyone. That's what I believe. I fought for this kind of freedom, to be a citizen of the world, not a citizen of the United States. I really believe that, and whatever is said about just being for the United States is not right. It's wrong. It's because we belong to this world. Our world is our home.
Thank you very much.
I travel all over.
Thank you. We appreciate very much Manuel's perspective, and interesting, two veterans with different perspectives. Let me go with Franklin, and I'll work my way across as quickly as I can.
Terrorism is war. More people are terrorized in a war. And the reason why they terrorize you, they become your enemy. Japan attacked us because we cut off their coal. The Middle East war, we had the shortage of oil. If you study all the history, a shortage of a commodity demands a war. So I don't know how many of you study history, but just look it up. Look up any war, and it's always fighting over a commodity. So what needs to happen is our country's designed, if we're attacked, to divide into 6 different areas. To have their own cows, their own vegetables, their own water, their own electricity. They even have different reserve banks. So it all gets divided so if one part's destroyed. Well, that was great 100 years ago. Now we're a global economy. With our population sizes, we have to get food from all over the world. For instance, most of our vegetables and fruits come from South America. If we close the border, we won't have any fruits or vegetables. So people need to look at everything as a global economy. If you look at a Nissan car, it could have a Ford transmission, it could have a Chrysler axle, it could have a Japanese engine. Nothing is made only in America anymore. It's a global economy, and we need information with people out there gathering information to protect us.
I'm going to call on Bill while you pass the mic to Cecilia. Yes, Bill. Oh, I'm so sorry. My apologies. I can't read your label from here. Sorry.
I have to add that I spent 25 years in the Marine Corps, and one of the things that I think we're talking grand issues here, but we have finite resources. I spent 7 years in South America fighting the drug war, both on active duty and as a private contractor. There is so much money wasted that goes essentially to the bad guys. You look at where aid goes in Africa. It's confiscated as soon as it comes off the docks. The warlords take it and feed their own troops and then sell it to the civilians. Once these programs get started, they can't be stopped. We need to take a good, hard, basic look at everything we're doing, cut out the worst offenders, pull back some, evaluate what we need to do, and then go on. We can't pull back and become isolationists, but we cannot feed and protect the entire world.
We have a wealth of perspectives here this evening. Let me, Cecilia, yes.
I agree with Buck. I think we have to be extremely careful on how we budget every department in every area of our country first. If we're going to be strong, we have to start to understand how to budget things and not waste any money. We have seen a lot of waste overseas through corruption of the use of our money that is directed to go and help people, but it really doesn't get to the people. There is a lot of things that we have to rethink about security, because I believe that security is not just security because we're fighting an enemy with rifles and guns. We have to think about our security of our children when they get involved with drugs. And I think that's the main thing that we have to look into. I believe that we should become, continue to be open to trade, because trade is always good, but at a level playing field. We cannot continue to compete with countries that are not properly or that are abusing the systems or the trade agreements that are negotiated.
Thank you. Joanna?
I would like to respond to Franklin. He said that the wars were because of commodities. So I think we are very happy now that we have we as Americans have a sufficiency of gas and sufficiency of oil. That's why in case of anything bad happening, we are self-sufficient. As for the policy of our government, I think here we could look slightly to Great Britain, where the policy of the government of Her Majesty the Queen is such as is good for the people of Her Majesty the Queen. Thank you.
Yes. James?
Yes, just to respond about how I see option one, to me, this is the option best suited for restoring the Republic. Article 1, Section A clearly says that we need to declare war before we send troops anywhere, or that includes sending missiles and bombs. We don't do that anymore. We're 18 years into a war, and there's no serious thought into getting our troops out of these wars. If you look into what they're spending money on, they're spending money on natural gas stations, where in Afghanistan they don't have vehicles that take that sort of gas. And that's the sort of waste that we're seeing that is rampant. And so the Pentagon feels entitled, and the people who want a strong military feel like the Pentagon doesn't need to or should not need to be audited. And I disagree. I think we need to audit all of these departments and be much more aware. Even hawks like Lindsey Graham was surprised to find out that we had troops in Angola when those Green Berets were killed. He was like, I didn't know we had troops there. Well, that's how bad it is. They're all over the country, and they're not really serving interests. And there's a lot of concern that this means isolationism. I disagree. I believe that we need to have I'm a strong proponent of free trade all over the world. And I think those are the best means of keeping America safe, because it's been several years, but I remember we were studying various foreign policies in college, and if you've ever heard of the McDonald's peace theory, it was back then, over 60 years considered one of the strongest foreign policy models because for as long as there's been two countries with a McDonald's within their border, they've never gone to war. And that held true for over 50 years. Up until in 2008, when I was at Officer Candidate School at Quantico, when Russia invaded South Ossetia. Now, since then, like that was in 2008, and I was like, oh no, McDonald's peace theory has failed. But if you look like 2 years later, Russia, Moscow, they started looking at, we're going to start shutting down McDonald's because trade relations with the United States was starting to decline. And it's not about Happy Meals, it's not about French fries, but just to be clear, it's about trade. Trade is what keeps us seeking to find peaceful resolutions because people have their finances and their wealth invested in each other's countries. And so I just wanted to point that out.
Jerome, and then I know Emerson and Tom and others. Yes. Oh, Anthony.
Sadly, we can't take notes and capture all this, so we don't lose sight of. Well, I lose sight of some of it, but I want to try to encapsulate some of what I heard going around the room. Yeah. One, wars are not over commodity, not necessarily over commodity. They don't have to be. We need to use developed minds over guided missiles and think it out and talk it out before we have to fight it out. One of the problems that we have with that idea and that notion is that when America goes to war, only 1% of the country goes. The other 99% goes to the mall. And we may read about it, we may not. But there's such an indifference to the engagement because the threat is kept offshore and borne by other people. The crucifix of war is carried routinely by the smallest segment of the United States population, and I think we lose sight of everybody's role and responsibility to maintain security in the country, or for the country. I don't know about the McDonald's theory. I'm not, I shall. But the one thing that I want to say is that each one of us has an obligation to find a way to get our shoulder under the crucifix that secures this nation. When we talk about national security, it is not a spectator sport. Everybody has a role and a responsibility to play. And instead of looking for a way to watch it from the bleachers, we need to figure out how to get onto the playing field. Everybody's got a slice of the responsibility. You just got to figure out what yours is. Don't run from it, run to it.
Emerson, before I come to you, if you'll allow me, we are theoretically going on to choice number 2, although I've never quite seen something escalate so quickly and launch across all 3 just from the get-go. But we will continue our choice work. Option number 2 says that we must assert U.S. power and maintain dominance to ensure global stability, protect freedom and prosperity by fighting threats at their source, or ignore those threats and face them here at home. I don't know how that dovetails with what you were going to say anyway, Emerson, but have at it.
Well, I truly believe, first and foremost, I want to say I would like to thank all the veterans for their service. I'm also a veteran.
Absolutely.
I'm a veteran of Desert Storm with the U.S. Army. I'm sorry, I'm not a Marine, but I like the Army, okay? But I will say this, okay? I think it's important for us to remember we need to have balance, okay? So whereas we're talking about taking care of our unfortunate here in America, I agree with that wholeheartedly. We should take care of them. I think we have to also remember that 100 years ago, we were an agricultural economy, fruits, vegetables, we were growing things. That's great. Our population has grown, and that no longer supports our economy. The new agricultural field is technology, and technology is global. So when you talk about taking care of our people here at home, in order to do that, we have to remain global, and we have to be competitive in technology, and we also have to move forward with the rest of the world, because that is what's going to finance our ability to take care of the people here at home. We cannot go backwards. It's not going to happen. Ever since Back to the Future came on and they were looking at each other on television screen, and now we have FaceTime, we're not going backwards. So we have to keep it in perspective. And from a law enforcement perspective, again, it is better to find the origin and mitigate the origin, then I also have to try and mitigate the origin and deal with the ripple effect that's going to occur here.
Yes. Tom?
I don't want to give up our number one position in the world, period. There is a lot of stuff that goes on that we're involved in that we shouldn't be involved in. I agree that we should declare war before we start a war. I agree that we are funding third world dictators. That money that we're giving in foreign aid never gets to the people. There are tons of examples of how we waste money. But at the same time, if it is in our interest to be somewhere else, we should be willing to go even if we have to go alone. Everything we've done alone. We can't depend on the international community to support the interest of the American people. They don't. We are in a global world. I mean, the commerce is completely different. Our threats are completely different. But there's no need for us to sacrifice our number one position in the world in order to deal with these other issues.
Thank you. Anthony?
I've heard all your points, and a lot of you make great points. You guys have so much wisdom and everything. But a lot of what I've heard is justifying war, and for the people on the sidelines, as Manuel, the second caller, called, it's the whole world thing. We have to justify war for everything, and you know what? It's like, okay, yeah, we get the origin, but what about the stories of us bombing, innocent people? Us going into countries that we cripple their economy, we cripple everything. They come over here and we say no. America, to me, is the first one to create its own monsters, but ignore them at the same time. And then when they come to us, we say, well, you're your own country. We got it. We as a country, we need to take care of our people first. We do. But, through talking it out, having conversations between actual people that we know that are good, and not with the people that are bad, that are not corrupt, then we can start creating some change and trying to say, okay, how can we do this, but in a way that doesn't affect other people that we created its own monsters. When we start bombing other people in the Middle East, you take out a whole family, and now a father's left without their family, so in the name of God and for their own God, they'll come to us and try to get whatever revenge. And then we have our own terrorists here that are not even from any other country. They're right here in the U.S., and we're not even taking care of it. So we say its origin. Well, how about we start with us first?
Angel.
Well, Anthony, I would like to comment on what you said. Now, we also have to keep in mind, war is very tragic. We do a lot of things that we shouldn't be proud of, and a lot of countries do things that they shouldn't be proud of. But I've never seen it, and I know a lot of people here on this panel have seen it. But war is tragic, and yes, there's a lot of things that happen that we are not very proud of, but that's war. Don't get me wrong, I would gladly like to pretend families that they are going to be protected throughout war, but it's not going to happen. It's a very chaotic thing. But if we do not get involved, let's look back at World War II. Someone referenced that. I don't remember who specifically. But we got into the Great Depression, and we said, you know what? I'm not going to mess with you. I need to focus on myself. And I'm not going to sit here and wave my American flag all over the place saying that we are the best, and we can get involved with whoever we want to. We can, and we are one of the strongest military-wise. But look at France and Britain when Hitler started taking over Poland. They ignored him. They had so many times to get involved and protect those people, but they did not. Nor did we, and I'm not going to shield us, even though I would like to say we did something, but we didn't, because we needed to help ourselves. And I'm not going to say what we did was wrong, but sometimes we need to get involved because we have to. Because if there is no America, how are we going to defend it? How are we going to be able to talk about it to make our country better if it is not here?
Chuck.
The wording for approach 2 is sort of dark and hegemonic sounding, and maybe a bit of a caricature compared to maybe the same wording similar for approach 1. But when you look at U.S. foreign policy, one of the problems is that U.S. income is directly tied to the economic system and the political systems that have been created in the world. And so the United States is the strongest country defending that system, for better or worse, depending on whether you think about it. Globalization, for example, is very much an American product. It has produced a much larger economic pie in countries, but we've also seen a widening gap between rich and poor in the United States that goes back 40 plus years. And this has been occurring in Europe as well. And so that's resulted in polarization in politics left and right, not only in the United States, but in other countries. When we look at some of these issues, it's important to think about what grows that pie versus cutting off or having the kind of narrow issues about thinking only internally. So there are some misnomers about U.S. foreign policy. For example, that we spend a huge amount of money on other countries. The vast majority of American aid to other countries is military, and the biggest chunk of that goes to Israel and Egypt. And so the amount of foreign aid is a very small percentage of the American economy compared to other developed countries in the world. Do we waste money here and there? Are there wars that we could have avoided? Yes. Could that money have been spent there? But when it comes to American spending priorities, this is a very wealthy country, and it comes down to political agendas and priorities and willingness. We don't spend on problems domestically because we lack the political will to do so. And that has been particularly a problem of the United States. It is not a consequence of spending money on other countries. We spend money on other countries, and we engage in free trade agreements, especially with allies, especially to prop up the U.S. role in the world. That's why we do it, because it's in our economic interest, and it tends to be in our security interest. Not that that makes debates simply go away, but that's why we do it.
All right. I know that Andres and Mary and Reggie and Franklin and other people are waiting, but we're going to Nicholas on the phone. Good evening, Nicholas. Welcome back.
Hi.
Hi.
First, I'd like to say that I believe I was misunderstood. I am not an isolationist. I just believe that my family needs to be healthy if I'm going to help my neighbors. I am taking care of my 93-year-old mother. I have to take care of myself. I know it sounds selfish, but it's not. Because if I get sick, how am I going to take care of her? I've got to eat well. I've got to make sure that I eat the right foods. I got to exercise. My country, maybe I'm a little naive, but I don't believe we're going to lose our number one status. We're America, guys. Come on. As long as we don't make the wrong decisions, like some of the gentlemen here have said, that we get involved with just anybody that tells us to go over there and help them out. Well, how are we going to lose our number one status? We're America. Look at our history. Fear is the only thing we need to fear, guys.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you.
Yes, and you rustled up a few Semper Fi's behind me here as you were speaking earlier, so thanks for your phone calls. Okay, let me stick to, let's see, Andres, I believe, was next.
Now, when we're talking about, well, firstly, thank you for your service. But America's a really wealthy nation. It's far better off than most of the other countries in the world, and we have the ability to get involved in foreign affairs because we can, and the people in this country are far better off than other people in other countries. The income rate is higher than most, but not as high as some European countries. But back to the point that being isolationist will ruin the world while America is the main power. It does have the power to intervene because we have to intervene, not in all conflicts, but in major ones.
Yes, Mary.
Okay, I just want to talk to my friend here, okay, to let him know a little of the history. We actually were attacked on 9/11. We didn't start that war. And we have to remember these conflicts are much bigger. There's an ideology that has nothing to do with commodities or so forth and so on. And yes, we need to right-size our military. We need to right-size our government. We need to right-size how we do things and how we spend. But I would also submit we need to right-size all our other programs in the government, we have $22 trillion in debt. We have $200 trillion of unfunded liabilities. We don't have the ability to go and support the entire world. But I will say there is this concept, peace through strength. If we are not strong, we will be attacked. And when we fight wars in other countries, we want to fight our wars somewhere else. We want to take the fight to the enemy, not bring that here to the U.S. And anybody who doesn't understand the emerging threats of China, they are expanding and expanding and expanding. They have 1.5 billion people. They can take us if they continue to expand their technology and take over our intellectual property like they have been, and we're just sitting there like sitting ducks. But the other point I want to make is America, yes, we have some faults, but we are the best country on the face of this earth, and we have liberated millions and millions and millions of people from oppressors. So we don't go over and take countries over. We don't incorporate those countries. We don't incorporate those people. We liberate people. So I think we need to remember that.
All right. I'm going to go to Reggie and then Larry. I'll be right back to you. Reggie?
What I was going to say, being a person that's been on the ground, I mean, it would be nice in that perfect world if we didn't have to go to all these places to do different things. But I'm just telling you, being a person on the ground, to be able to be there, trying to help another nation, having soldiers with you and you're doing different things, a family comes up towards you, you want to help them, your heart is bleeding, want to help them, and the father or the son just starts shooting at you. You there to try to escort their kids to school. I was there. I've been on the ground, you know, to do that, and then to see somebody do that to you. So in a perfect world, yeah, that would be nice, but we're there for a reason. You know, to see a grandmother say to you, thank you, just to see her grandkids be able to play soccer on a field that was bloody with other different things. You cleaned it up to get it right. Or to see that mother come up to you, can't even speak your language, but she get out a book just to be able to tell you, thank you for taking little Henry or Joetta to school that didn't even have the opportunity to go to school. That's why we assert our power. That's why we're out there. That's why we got to be in places that we got to be to keep America the best place to be and keep our people free.
Thank you, Reggie. Larry?
Yes, I'd just like to get maybe back at the heart of issue point number 2,
Yes, sir.
because I think, you know, there's a strong, you know, argument to be made for a robust national defense. We face so many different challenges, more complex today than maybe in previous generations. We have issues with, of course, Russia. Russian military buildup is occurring. They're advancing their weapons. They're testing them in Syria. They present a challenge in terms of cyber, of course, and influence operations. We also have issues with China and their basically desire to dominate, you know, the South China Sea and other areas. But we have also still this, besides this growing peer-on-peer situation, we have problems still with terrorism. I think Sri Lanka demonstrates that. So I just want to advocate the idea that having a strong defense is not necessarily antagonistic to the idea of taking care of our situation here at home, right? Again, there's no guarantee if we reduce the defense budget that we'll actually spend it on the right things that we need to protect, you know, or help people around the country, right? So I just wanted to say that, again, a strong national defense, I think, is essential, especially given the complex international security environment that we see today.
Thank you very much. I'm going to Austin and Chet. Yes, Austin?
So something I'm going to tap back with Mary here on this one. Ooh, I wonder what it'll be. No, I'm joking. When it comes to this one, I really liked how you hit something that I talked about just recently in one of my history classes, and it's America's, our democracy. It's not a new idea. It's not an old idea. It's a balance. It goes back and forth, but it comes to this point to where we are one of the first experiments in this, and we still are an experiment, and it's beautiful. England was expanding. England was expanding beyond economical proportions. I mean, it was asserting its power way beyond its own sea. They were traveling in all 7 oceans, almost on every continent. They were the naval power, and they dominated the globe for an era. And it was horrifying, because today, you go to these countries, and where they did assert, and again, not every single country that they had some type of colonial, settlement, nothing to that point. But the majority of their colonies today, their cultures are eradicated. 1743, on their own island, they eradicated the majority of Highland heritage. But the Highlanders wanted liberation from England. So the question that I would like to be able to make sure that we defend is liberation at what cost? If we're over-asserting our opinion, our democracy, America is the answer. By destroying a completely open idea that is not hostile, we're eradicating our own humanity globally.
Thank you very much. I'm coming back to Chet in studio, but we have a phone call from Augie. Good evening, Augie. Please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to tell you that we need a sort of power, but it's very, very difficult, as some of the members have mentioned, because of the sense of globalization. Like Franklin was saying, that when a vehicle is produced, nuts could be produced in Mexico, the engine could be produced in USA, another part could be produced in Chile, and so forth and so on in Japan. So it's very, very competitive, because the biggest issue that I think affects our world is this. It's greed. And let me say what I mean by this. For instance, a lot of these grants and a lot of this money that we give out to other countries in the world, we don't do it just because we're kind and because we want to enforce our democracy. We want to do it because we want to control some way that country, like China was to control the South Korea, the China Seas, and all that other parts of the world. For instance, back in the early 1900s, the Banana Republic of Nicaragua, one of the Banana Republics, the Dulles brothers, they were actually the ambassadors for the United States of that part of the world. And they had a monopoly and wanted to control bananas being exported to the U.S. and the rest of the world. That's why we're known as the Banana Republics. Did we go to Nicaragua back in the early 1900s, or even in the Iran-Contra scandal, because we loved them so much? No, because we thought we were going to get something out of it. That's one point. Second of all, China, we're making China a powerful country economically. First of all, because they're a society that saves. It's been known that they save approximately 50% of their income, a Chinese family. That's one thing. Who is making China powerful? We are. The corporations of the United States, we send our jobs, our factories to China, Mexico, not because we don't love our country, because they're going to pay a lot less. And who are those workers going to be? The workers are going to be Chinese workers, where they might be getting an income, much less income than the U.S., but the American worker that had a job a month ago no longer has a job. So we're kind of kicking ourselves in the butt. Why? Because certain people want to get richer and richer and richer, irrelevant if it's affecting the country or not. That's kind of what I wanted to make my point about.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your phone call, and excellent points all the way around. Chet?
Just sort of springing off of what Augie just mentioned, one of the things that I think we sort of are jaded against in this conversation is our defense and our strength doesn't necessarily need to be military. China has announced a movement now. They're going to spend over $1 trillion in the next 10 years to create better pathways for trade with 56 different nations around the world. Their whole game is to improve the movement of trade and to facilitate the movement of trade so that they can continue to grow their GDP. It's going to be an economic war. And if we look at just numbers statistically, I think Mary pointed out there's 1.3 billion of them. There are 383 million of us. Unless we're extremely productive and we have to be working together, we're not going to win.
Yes, Anthony?
I'd like to go on 2 points. The first one is, paranoia is a funny thing. It justifies everything, and then, experience, being on there. But there are also, other things that come out. There was a recent video that surfaced of a Marine sending out videos of him in combat. And he wanted to, I guess not exploit, but put his message out that it's more of a waiting game, I guess, at this point. We've been there for the longest time. And in no means, I don't think that, I think war sometimes, it is necessary. We liberated many peoples. We liberated many people that needed our help. And in some cases, we're there for, not for absolutely no reason, but we're there, just waiting to get hit. We're waiting to get hurt. And about this whole nativist attitude, everyone keeps saying American, American, American this, or American this. We're United States citizens, let's be honest. There's North America, there's South America. As you say we're American, is, it's just already pointing out the fact that, it's all about us, We have this nativist attitude that carries on into everything we do, globalization, war is just something that, we try to justify through anything, and if it just be justified through money, through politics, through commodities, it's not any easier having a gun where you have to look at a child coming at you loaded with a bomb and you don't know whether to make the shot or not because you have to protect your troops. And we ended up doing something, and we did get attacked. We did get attacked in 2001. So we blamed a few bad eggs, and we destroyed a lot of people. We destroyed a lot of people's lives for a few bad eggs. And it's sad. It really is sad that, we blame for so many small things that we've created. Al-Qaeda, ISIL, if we start looking at history, they're funded through the U.S. We created these things. And it's like, so I'm going back on it. We created our own monsters. We ignored it and saying, hey, now we have a reason to go fight for more than 10 years of war, So to say that, we're American and everything, it's just proving the world's point. It's going back to high school again, while we're the big jock trying to make a point through everybody. There's people out there studying to say, how can we make our world better? And that's how they're going to defeat us, but not by brute force. If they wanted us to defeat us by brute force, you say billions, and we're only, 300 million. They would have done it a long time ago, and they would have done it with other people's help. We need to get out of this attitude, of nativist attitude, and start saying, how can we expand the world and act like human beings, or actually team up with the real human beings and make the world a better place?
You have a lot of people wanting to speak. At this point, I need to shift into choice number 3. I'm going to start with Sherry and work my way down. Choice number 3, to recap, says we must collaborate in order to solve our problems. What poses the biggest threat is assuming that we can take action unilaterally and in isolation. Sherry?
I spent 12 years of my childhood growing up in foreign countries. I spent 6 years in Bolivia, South America. I spent time in Taiwan and Laos. And I can say from my own personal experience that there were people who loved us and there were people who hated us because they saw us as imperialists. They saw us as imposing our will on their own country and their own people and taking over. And there were others who were so grateful that we were there to help them and teach them and share with them, and who wanted to share our cultures even. And those were such wonderful experiences, but it did teach me, you really can't say these people hate us and these people love us, because no, there's some that really are so glad you're there, and there's some who wish you would just leave.
Thank you for that. We have a telephone call, and then I'll come back to Chet. Isaac, good evening. Hello? Yes, go ahead, please, Isaac.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, there's this stigma that when countries embark into the process of unification, whether through militaristic or economic needs, they're completely on the same page, but that stigma is wrong. Most people are really alluded to the fact that allification is just sugar-coated appeasement for a greater good. But with every situation of appeasement, in the end just comes a certain, like, I guess, a cross point of a threshold where that appeasement ends. And why does that appeasement end? It ends because at the end of the day, what they appeased in the first place, these countries realize that it's not worth it and that this agreement is beginning to hinder them. So while I do believe that unification is a big need of many countries, a distance should be made. And this appeasement and hiding the word appeasement with unification or being allies, we should just flat out say what it is and keep our distance at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, every allies that there's been in history have always come to an end. And I think instead of trying to avoid it, we just need to start preparing for things like these.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that phone call. And Chet, I know you, pardon me, Chuck. Yes, I knew it was a CH word, but that, yeah, okay. I'm sorry, Chuck. Go ahead, please.
Actually, I want to partially agree with Chet in the sense that, you know, what China is doing today, of course, it does appear to be like economic war, but these types of economic systems require defense as well. Just like the British had, you know, colonies around the world in order to defend their economic interests. The United States does the same thing. China is already doing that. We share docking rights in Djibouti, small African country, where there's a dock for the United States and one for China. And so they're getting interested in the world because they need raw materials to keep their economy going, just like the United States does. So that's something where we can't forget about that. How much does that change in the new millennia? Well, we do see, for example, the cyber crime and all these kinds of other ways of undermining countries that are, of course, new millennia type of ways of operating. But when we go back and we look at history, especially since World War I, the democracies have fought on the same side. And those are, of course, many countries that are allies with each other. So in that case, the caller was like, well, 19th century alliances came and went, but that was realism. In this new day and age, well, capitalism, democracy, they tend to go together, and that's part of what the United States does. And actually, just James, right? One of the issues about this McDonald's theory is actually 1998 when NATO bombed Serbia. That didn't hold. So in case anybody's going to cite that at home, I wanted to point that out. But in regard to option 3, what I think is critically important and nobody's brought up is global warming. You know, that leftist socialist organization called the Department of Defense sees this as a real threat for the future. And we have our head in the sand like an ostrich about that. Maybe that will only last a few more years, but that clearly is something that is already forcing our budget, the number of disasters, the amount that that's going to be able to be, you know, inflict on just the budget in the United States. That is a security concern.
Absolutely. I'm Larry and Jerome and Franklin. I know you've been waiting.
Monica, sorry, I know we're on option 3 now, but I just want to say one thing about option 2, then go to 3.
No worries, no worries.
You know, again, the conversation has been pretty dark about interventions and wars, but national defense also serves another purpose, right? And that's deterrence, right? The prevention of the outbreak of wars. And so having a strong defense, whether it's conventional, nuclear, maybe now in the future cyber, that's going to be important to think about. Now, with regard to option 3, and again, I think this is about collaborating with allies, I think we've seen, especially over the last several years, I've had the opportunity to travel in Europe, and there are real concerns in Europe about the NATO alliance and its future. I've been in Romania. I have had students go to the Baltic countries as well, come back reporting basically concerns about Russia and what the future may hold for the alliance. Will it actually live up to its charter to defend other nations? And will the U.S. actually do that as well? I would like to see us go back, of course, to a stronger, more robust transatlantic alliance, because I think it's very important given the security challenges that we face today.
Thank you. Yes, Jerome?
Madeleine Albright coined the phrase, the United States is the indispensable nation. I believe she was the Secretary of State under Bill Clinton. I'm not sure. I think that's what it was. And I think it says a lot about our role and responsibility. There's certain things you just can't shrink from. And pause and think for just a minute. If we were not the nation that we are, for whatever our goods or our ills are, consider if we were not on the scene, what conditions might we face? I'm thinking most people in here really would not want to know. I know I wouldn't. The other thing that I want to say, go back to one of my initial points. The quality of leadership that you choose will determine the quality of the outcome that we face in every one of the categories that we have been speaking about. And one of the sins that we suffer through is allowing. No, I shouldn't say allowing. We choose not to be engaged in the political process. We let somebody else choose the leadership. Then we blame the quality of the leadership, but because we didn't participate in the selection process, there are people who say, well, really, you got nothing to say. And I think that when I put an umbrella or a tent over top of all of this, consider the quality of information that you have about those people who you choose to assume these great mantles of responsibility, those people who we choose to control the levers of power, the purse strings of the nation. All of those things have implications. So I go back to the point when I said you need to find a way to get your shoulder under the crucifix, because all of those things make up the crucifix. And anytime we believe it's okay to sit down and watch and think somebody else is going to do it, that will be the first footstep to our demise, imposing those responsibilities on somebody else. I'll say this and I'll pass the mic. One thing that I read in the book by Gibbons, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. What began to happen was that the role of the citizen and defending the nation was purchased, and Rome bought a lot of mercenaries, so the mercenaries would go with the highest bidder. So those persons could, in turn, turn on Rome. We have got to accept the role and responsibility, however small, to make sure that we are not putting those responsibilities on somebody else. Citizenship is a role, it is a responsibility, it is a task. It's not a spectator sport. And so much of what we've talked about all around the stage are too many people who are choosing to be spectators and not players in the game of democracy of the United States. And unless and until we get that cured, we're going to continue to limp along, even though I believe it's in the right direction. All yardage is good. You could stumble, you could run, but if you're making yardage, you're okay. But consider just how much better off we could be if everybody looked for a way to get engaged and involved in the process, as opposed to being spectators in this game of life.
Franklin?
Terrorism escalates and escalates from hate. Terrorism escalates into battles, and eventually it escalates into wars. The United States, for instance, when England and Britain and the United States were fighting for territory, they used disinformation. And the reason I'm going to talk about this real quick, they would tell the Indians, you help us and we'll defeat them. If you look at all the Indian reservations in the United States, they're all placed along the Canadian border, the Mexican border, the old border between Britain and France. Well, the same thing. When we needed bananas, we had the banana republics. We needed the Panama Canal, the government was overthrown. We needed the railroad through Nicaragua, the government was overthrown. So we had a beautiful, beautiful intelligence agency that would find out what we needed to know to take over what we needed. Now, today we have what we call cyber terrorism. This is more dangerous than the rockets from North Korea, the Blitzkrieg tanks from Germany, the bombers coming over from other countries bombing England and stuff. Cyber terrorism is the biggest disinformation there is. They have the black community against the white community. They have the Christians against the Muslims. They have the Republicans against the Democrats. The Nazis, when the Nazis lost the war in Germany, they infiltrated the jungles of Mexico. And they said, we're not going to make any more tanks or bombs or missiles or submarines. We're going to make drug labs. And we're going to poison all these enemies all over the world. When you're talking about the drug labs, they're not no little small operations. They're billion-dollar operations. And they're flooding all their enemies with drugs, and they're getting paid for the drugs and making more. That is the new war. That is the new war. So what I'm telling you is this cyber terrorism, when they could cut off the water to a dam, cut off your electricity. And what they're doing is they're pitting us against each other. The Republicans hate the Democrats. The African Americans and the white nationalists, the Mexicans and the Muslims. All this, if you look at all these professional memes, like on Facebook, if I send you a message on Facebook, I don't know how to make a professional meme, but yet they have a professional picture there and a professional music and all this. Those are Russian memes. Those are Chinese memes. Those are sent to both sides. They're to make you hate each other. They're to create hate, which creates terrorism, domestic and foreign, which leads to battles and leads to wars. That is my biggest fear of terrorism in the future, cyber terrorism.
Mary.
Okay, I was just going to say, first, just to clarify, since the beginning of mankind, there has been war. There will continue to be wars. The nature of wars varies depending on any set of circumstances. So remember what Plato said. Only the dead will never see war. Okay, that being said, I agree totally with Jerome. We have to be involved. We have to be involved with our politicians. And I think what's going on today, this border crisis, is a direct result of the abdication of the responsibility of the Congress. So it's escalated over the last year or two. But who is in charge of immigration policy? The United States Congress. And when you have people who have been in that job for 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years, and they have not dealt with this, and they keep this country in this constant turmoil, they are totally irresponsible, and we're the ones seeing the effect of that. They're up in Washington, D.C. They don't have to deal with what's going on in the border, but they are responsible for this.
Thank you. I'm going to Joanna, James, Emerson, and Andres, and everybody else from there.
I agree with Tom when he said that America is number one, and let's keep it this way. I think America is number one because, first of all, the Americans have fought two great wars for the ideas that created America. It was first the war 1776 with the British, and then there was the Civil War, where the nation stood against the brother, and we fought for our ideas. And now, as Jerome said, we have responsibilities. I am a naturalized citizen, and I'm 2 years a citizen. I come from Poland, from Europe. And I've lived in many countries, and I have to tell you that America is the best country I have lived in. And there is no ideal country. And I would like to discuss now with Anthony. Yes. Well, we are all humans and we are sinful, so there is not going to be any ideal country because it's utopia. But America, because of the ideas that created this country, these great ideas, that is why America is the leading force. Of course, we are afraid of China because they have 1.5 billion people, and we are only 350 million. But we are, the power of America is that we believe in every individual. Every individual has the opportunity to develop. And in China, it's a mass. You look at the people as a mass. If the mass is not going to be so inventive, so creative as individuals. So I am not afraid of America losing the first position. First of all, because I have been there. I have had the experience of a person living in Europe, living in other countries, and comparing the experience that Anthony, because he is very young, he doesn't have it. He just repeats opinions because these are not his own opinions. You didn't go through there. You don't know what does it mean to think, oh, America is freedom. When will they be here? And they finally are. And we are happy, and we Americans are the best nation. Thank you.
James.
I do believe that America has excellent founding ideas. I struggle with the concept of American exceptionalism, but I believe that the founding ideas and values of America are exceptional. But again, I believe that we've lost our way, and I want to reiterate that we need to restore the republic. So Cybersecurity, I think, is a very legitimate concern. These professional meme creators are a concern, and we need to. How do we reunite our country? I seek to reunite our country by respecting the rule of law, that is our Constitution, respecting our Bill of Rights, and respecting this what created us as a powerful nation, which was free market enterprise. And former Joint Chief of Staff Admiral McMullen said that the greatest threat to national security is our national debt. Another great warfighter was General Smedley Butler, who fought in World War I and many other wars, and he said that war is a racket because he saw firsthand that too many times he sent Marines off to die for wars that had no legitimate point to keeping America safe. And we have not been able to live up to our debts owed to our veterans, and that tradition goes back all the way to the Revolutionary War. And today, there are 22, 23 veterans a day who are committing suicide, and the only way to help those people out, I believe, is to get out of all of these unconstitutional wars so that we can focus on helping them first. And the Pentagon, again, it needs to be looked at. I'm okay with being number one, but we spend as much on defense as the next 4 or 5 or 10 countries. I don't know exactly. And I believe that free market enterprise, we can be number one, most money spent on defense, but I don't see why we need to subsidize Europe and their defense. I'd rather have a strong Europe to work with, which kind of alludes into option 3. And then capitalism, I don't see as a zero-sum gain. I believe that, in trade, both sides win. And so I'm not afraid of China becoming more wealthy. And I definitely want to see Central America and Mexico become more wealthy. And I believe that it's not through foreign intervention and the CIA going in there and screwing things around, the State Department, but I believe that by free trade, so hiring people and they send remittance checks back to Central America, I believe that is how someday we can live next to countries to our south who are no longer so poor. It's through free trade. I just strongly believe in it. And finally, what are we losing at home with our paranoia? I question the legitimacy of the Department of Homeland Security. I question the NSA. I question the FBI. I question a lot of these agencies. Some of them they all need to be audited. Some of them need to be dialed back, and a few of them need to be abolished outright. And we need to put the reset button on them. Look at when you go to the airport. You are no longer a free person. You look like a serf as you go through, and they can see your whole body. And if you don't want to go through the scanner, they'll feel your private parts. That's the kind of people we have become, and I believe that is a shame. And we need to look back at that and say, is this necessary? Because I forget the name of that useless department at the airport, but they've never caught a terrorist. At TSA, they've 0 terrorists caught since they've been created. Same goes for a lot of these other departments. I do believe that national defense is important, but I think if we get back to those founding values, we will be safe.
We have a quick comment from Joanna, and then I have a number of other people waiting to speak.
Just about NATO, every country of NATO is supposed to pay 2% of GDP. So the smaller the country and the smaller the economy, the smaller of the amount, and that's the response to your. Yes, it's 2%. So it's justified.
Brisa.
So I've been watching everybody's positions and their points, and there's so many smart people around me. I feel so intimidated, but
we're glad you're here.
Thank you. And I was deciding, okay, what kind of points do I want to make, and what points are more important? Whether it's should we pull back? Should we actually try to fix what's happening here in America, or should we still be helping other countries? So I decided that I'm not going to choose a side. I'm just going to go in the middle. So I do think that.
Guess what? That's what this is about.
So so I actually really think that we shouldn't reprioritize, I don't think we should prioritize domestic or foreign, whatever, relationships or whatever. But I think that we should just for our foreign affairs, we should choose our battles. We shouldn't be out there in other people's countries if it's not needed and if it's not wanted. We shouldn't be not giving too much money to the military, because it's like the budget of the military is half of what, it's the budget of the military is a lot. That's all I have to say. But I think it should be reallocated to important things like education or housing. So rather than just how do I put this in terms? Rather than just having something more, like choosing which one's more important, I think we should just have like an equilibrium of what.
Instead of either or, it's both.
Yeah, practically.
Thank you. Thank you. Emerson.
The conversation is great. It's very interesting, but I will tell you, I remember a time when I used to be able to go to the airport with 3 suitcases weighing 65 pounds and just walk on, and I miss those days, right? But by the same token, I also remember standing up in my classroom pledging the allegiance every day. I also remember singing the national anthem, and since I've been in the military and now I work for the federal government and law enforcement, I know I've taken several oaths to support the Constitution of the United States of America. So I want to make sure that it's clear that for me, I am an American, okay? That being said, for anyone that has not experienced or watched television for the last several years post 9/11 and seen the various and the systematic attacks that have happened in this country, starting from 9/11, starting with people running people over with cars and the active shooter situations and the bombings, and then you don't realize that you are a soldier, you are a police officer, and most of all, you are a United States citizen. So I'm here from a law enforcement perspective just to talk about partnership. Right? We all have a responsibility and we all have to be partners in it. It doesn't matter if you're a housewife. It doesn't matter if you're a stay-at-home dad. It doesn't matter if you're an executive. It doesn't matter if you're in law enforcement or in the military. We all have a responsibility to work together to protect our country. And in protecting our country, we also protect others. We protect other countries as well because they come to our country, right, to experience the United States, just like we go to theirs to experience their countries. And we need these law enforcement partnerships and we need these citizen partnerships in order for everyone to be able to experience their own culture, their own history, and their own heritage. Because again, as we've been stating, this is a country of immigrants. It has never been isolated because we came from Britain, and Britain wasn't isolated when we came from Britain or when we came from France or when we came from Mexico or South America. So it's just that we have expanded into more relationships than the ones we had when the country originally started. So I would just put that plug in that from a law enforcement perspective, we need these partnerships, we need these relationships, and everyone should be vigilant in trying to ensure that we keep our country and other countries safe.
Excellent. We are down within the last 10 minutes of the program, fewer than 10 minutes actually, and we've already done it, but I could say we've dissolved into chaos. But what we've actually done is realize that there are false divisions between the choices. So with that said, I'm going with Austin, Andres, and Tom. Austin?
So I love how we transition into that. I want to address the two NATOs. Where Shet was coming when you were referring to, actually just forgot the topic. I apologize for that. With the 2%. Jerome and Mary, when it comes to participating in your government, I want you guys to picture for a moment, and this is going to take you back roughly kind of to the beginning of World War I, kind of more into World War II. Smell the smoke in the House of Lords. There's one bigger gentleman, Winston Churchill. He gets up in front of a mic, and people weren't really intimidated at first, but the second he became prime minister, it's like the world began to shake. I love the fact that we brought up that ship that the United States turned away that was full of Jews. They were at the island in New York, and we told them, turn back around. America turned back on a ship that we could have saved because we didn't want to get involved. But it took one man in the House of Lords to stand up and say, you know what? I would like to think for a moment, and I don't quote, word for word, that our colonies and interests beyond the seas and at home would like to come to the defense and the liberation of the old. He was referring to the fact that their new establishments, their new interests, would come to the defense and call when they needed it most. And we ended up doing that. And that laid the groundwork for a lot of international and global trade agreements and relations for the betterment of possibly the next 200, 300 years. Again, we would not see the countries that we see today if it weren't for England's imperialism. And it wouldn't be for China's imperialism either. The borders that we see today have a lot to do with that. And it's, the map is constantly being rewritten. And it's interesting to see what the next border is going to be. We don't really know at this point. We have these shadow governments. We've talked about terrorism. We've gone through the loop. But the question now is, it comes back. How are we going to help our people when in reality, we do have interests overseas, both at home and overseas? How are we going to help them all?
Thank you. Andres?
Yeah, I'm just going to change the subject a bit to go back to option number 3, that our greatest concern in national security or the security for the world would be climate change or what you'd like to call it global warming, is that when we look at what other countries are doing, such as China, is that they're sending soldiers not armed with rifles, but armed with shovels and trees, and they're planting those trees in areas that don't have any, and that's actually going to help their pollution problem, and to destroy a lot of problems with just a few solutions would be that we need to focus on climate change a lot, since a lot of that's putting an effect to the problem of climate change would be pollution, and most pollution, it comes from excessive gasoline, the exhaust of it, and gasoline comes from oil, and we gain all those materials from foreign nations, and we're just getting involved in them just because of the resources. So we have to be, in a way, isolationist in when it comes to our energy problem, which is why we need to begin to plant more trees. We need to look forward into more greener solutions in energy, so we don't have to get involved in other nations for resources. That wouldn't be our cause. It would be the cause of freedom, democracy, and the will of the people.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I just have to interject this real quick. Several people, or a couple people here have mentioned something about participating and being citizens and celebrating our citizenship. And I just want to point out that everyone in this room is a great participant. And I just want to thank you all very much.
Indeed, indeed. Tom?
What are you running for?
Yes.
I haven't declared it.
Yeah, he just said without a microphone, what are you running for? So, okay. Tom?
I was going to talk about international trade as it pertains to our security. But I can't let the global warming thing go. Mm-hmm. Guys, global warming is a boogeyman. It's out there. It's so big, there's nothing you can do about it. I don't care how many trees you plant. Mm-hmm. It's out of our control. And it's the kind of boogeyman that people will vote away their freedom in order to address. And that's all global warming is. I mean, I remember being a freshman in college. The world was going to end in 10 years, and we were going to freeze to death. I mean, I can still remember that Newsweek cover. And then we go from freezing to warming to climate change. The climate's been changing since day one. My mother's family comes from the Alps in northern Italy. When the glaciers recede and melt, they're finding campsites underneath them. What's that tell you? That glacier was not there before. I'm sorry, I had to go off on global warming.
Oh, me too. I want to say something about it. Oh, I can go?
Well,
okay. I just want to say that global warming is one of the biggest financial and political hoaxes that have been foisted on the American people. And Tom is right. People are willing to sell themselves down the river on this. I like to think I'm a very commonsensical kind of person, and the Earth has a life cycle. The sun has a life cycle. We're about halfway through our life cycle of 1 billion years, because the sun, when it goes out in another 500 million years, we're gone. And it doesn't matter if we have 10 trees or 20
You're
trees.
just full of good news tonight.
I
aren't
know,
you?
I am. But there have been an awful lot of people who've made an awful lot of money off this climate change. And I'm not saying the climate doesn't change. It does. It's called the weather. And there is not one person who can predict the weather with any 100% accuracy in the next week.
We have about 2 minutes left. Chet?
A modest proposal. I'm not even going to get into climate change, but several people have said we need to be more engaged and we need to get back to the Republic form. We haven't really declared a formal war since World War II. Everything has been police actions. I spent 2 tours in Vietnam. I understand that that wasn't a war. But I think that one of the things that has diminished our awareness as a country is there's only 1% involved. Let's reinstate the draft and start drafting kids at 18 and 19 years old and get everyone's family involved. It becomes a training operation. It becomes a wide-flung thing with resources that we could use for a lot of different things.
Thank you very much. We've done it again. We have left everyone wanting to say something, which is kind of a sign of success, that vague dissatisfaction. Good for us. We've done it again. Our thanks to the panelists. What an amazing bunch of people, and to all of our callers this evening. Tonight's discussion was the last of 3 annual National Issues Forums. If you are interested in participating in this amazing experience, please contact KCOS during regular business hours at 590-1313. And National Issues Forum can provide trained bilingual moderators for groups of 10 or more. It's a worthwhile process. Once again, dear Florence Fowler, we miss you. For the National Issues Forum, I'm Monica Gomez. Good night. Stay put. We have a nice...